Greetings, I am Wham Bam Duel, and welcome to my explanation of Spell Commander's 2024 Jaden Yuki deck for Elemental Heroes, Neos and Neospatians, and the new Yubel cards. I'm here to explain some of the different choices behind the deck, and explain why certain cards were included over other cards. Going through the cards in the main deck, there were certain cards that I absolutely wanted to include. I wanted to include Neos and the Neospatians. I wanted to include all the cards in the Favorite series, which consist of Winged Karibo level 6, Favorite Hero, Favorite Contact, and Eternal Favorite. And I wanted to include all of them because they work with the new fusion monster, Elemental Hero Flame Wingman Infernal Rage. One discussion that I was in the comments section was that even though we're playing the new Flame Wingman, we could still play Burstinatrix and Avian to use the original fusion materials as options. But I figured if you're that hellbent on using a wind and a fire monster to make this guy, you can just go ahead and use Stratos and Blazeman. Blazeman will even search you the polymerization, which is something that Burstinatrix most certainly will not do. Another comment I saw addressed the triple contact fusions and why I'm playing them and Cosmo Neos, the, I guess, quadruple contact fusion, over the original contact fusions like the Forbidden Air Neos, Dark Neos, Grand Neos, Aqua Neos, Flare Neos, and Glow Neos. And they made a good point that all of these monsters are additional monsters that can be summoned with Neos Fusion. But the reason I went for all these bigger contact fusion monsters instead is because none of these other contact fusion monsters do anything when they return to the extra deck. They just return to the extra deck during the end phase as a negative effect. And while that can be mitigated with the effects of Neos Space and the Grave effect of Neos Fusion, let's face it, those aren't always going to be up. So at least all of the triple contacts do something when they return to the extra deck. Chaos Neos sets all monsters face down. Nebula Neos draws a bunch of cards. Storm Neos heavy storms the field appropriately. Magma Neos bounces all cards on the field to the hand, and Cosmo Neos nukes the opponent's board. So even though there are less Neos fusion targets in the deck, I do like all of these triple and the one quadruple better than any of the double contact fusions that are just Neos and one other monster. And Neos Fusion still has two very good monsters it can summon in this deck, in Neos Kluger, which is made using Neos and Yubel, so that's one. And if you really want to use Neos and just one Neospatian, you can just make Brave Neos. Or if you don't want to use a Neospatian and you're instead looking to send a hero from deck to grave, Brave Neos is also good for that, because it can work with Prisma, Stratos, Ocean, any of these level 4 lower effect monsters. Additionally, Brave Neos also works as an excellent super poly target because it's just Neos and any low-level monster of the opponent's, but naturally all of the Omni heroes also work great as super polymerization monsters, as they can fuse with pretty much anything except exactly a god card to summon them. So, naturally, in the deck profile on Spell Commander's channel, we did a 20-card extra deck, with the 5 cards you want to move to the side deck being open to interpretation. I'd like to offer my personal interpretation. You can go with something else if you'd like. This is just how I'd personally do it. But the 5 cards I'd toss to the side deck would be Divine Neos, Nova Master, Absolute Zero, Great Tornado, and Gaia. And the reason I do that is because in GX, Jaden is up against so many, like a lot of the main villains of GX, like Darkness, Yubel, Sartorius, even Kagamaru to some extent, use light or dark monsters for most of their decks. So having the Shining and Escuridao being the main 2 Omni heroes would obviously work the best. And obviously Jaden can easily just swap out Omni Heroes for whoever he's going to go up against. Like if he's going up against Chaz, he'd obviously toss in Great Tornado in Escuridao's place, because Chaz uses a lot of light monsters with the Ojamas and the Union Machines, and he uses a lot of wind monsters with the Armed Dragons, so that would work out. Going up against Cyrus, he'd side in Elemental Hero Gaia, and so on and so forth. It just gives Jaden a lot of flexibility for which monsters he wants to super poly into. So that would be my idea for which cards could move to the side deck. I did want to include Jaden's legendary planet of Terra Firma, because man, this card is iconic. Even though we tend to focus on the anime side of things and don't focus on the manga side of the character's deck as much in these profiles, I did really want to include Terra Firma just because of how iconic and cool this monster is. And it lets Jaden have better usage of the counter trap protection of the elements, so it all works out. And Woodsman and Ocean aren't even, like, terrible monsters anyways. So with Magistry Alchemist, one of my favorite hero fusions is Elemental Hero Electrum. Only problem with this bad boy is that he requires 4 garnets. 4 bricky monsters that just don't do a lot in the modern day. I think there are like 1 or 2 cards that can cheat out an Elemental Hero Fusion monster, but I figure just having it referenced in the Art of Magistry Alchemist is just straight up better. Naturally, all the Yubel cards are in the side deck, because even though Jaden is permanently fused with Yubel, Yubel still isn't like the main focus of the deck. I still wanted Jaden to be capable of having Yubel help him out in duels they have to Yubel's fullest capabilities, so I wanted to include all the Yubel cards, and my good lord, is Yubel the Loving Defender Forever, an excellent super polymerization monster. It just uses any Yubel and sucks up the opponent's board and burns them for a lot of damage, if even like 3 of their monsters are used. Because let's face it, most opponents are going to be using solely effect monsters. So this and super polymerization with Yubel just takes an entire board and just, it's all gone. By far the most compelling thing that didn't go into this list that's probably the biggest honorable mention is Elemental Hero Shadow Mist and the Masked Hero series of monsters, along with the Mask Change quick play spells. These, of course, are the monsters that Jaden created in the manga version of his story, and they're so iconic, these Masked Heroes, because a lot of them, like Dark Law, are really good, and they also work with every attribute like the Omni Heroes, but the Omni Heroes are just better for this deck for super polymerization purposes, and we were already playing a 20 card extra deck, so there really just wasn't much room for the Masked Heroes this time around, as sad as that is to say. I really wish we had space for these cards, but at the end of the day, this is supposed to be more of a Elemental Hero Neos Yubel focused deck. On top of that, some of these Masked Heroes just straight up do not have good effects, like Masked Hero Goka, Masked Hero Vapor, or even Masked Hero Blast. The only ones I'd say are really good are Darklaw, Acid, Divine Wind, Anki, and Dian. Maybe some of these can be featured in a future list for Jaden if we do some other context, but that would be sometime in the further future. But rest assured, we have not forgotten about the Mask Change cards, Masked Heroes, or Shadow Mist. And it did feel a little bad to not have a main deck Dark Elemental Hero monster, but I mean, even if they're not explicitly Elemental Heroes, Crosskeeper and the Yubel cards are all still dark monsters that, even if they're not heroes, can still work for the purposes of different fusions, like Escuridao. There was one other card that I saw people talk about in Double Fusion, and for those who don't know, Double Fusion's whole thing is that It just pays 500 to do one fusion summon after another. And while it is a neat idea and a neat concept, there's not a whole lot of utility for it in this deck. Let's go through Jaden's extra deck. The Omni Heroes don't really have any bonuses for being fusion summoned into with double fusion. The Neos fusion monsters are all contact fusions that wouldn't be applicable for double fusion. No utility for Neos Kluger, Brave Neos, Terra Firma. Sunrise has like the smallest bit of utility, but it basically doesn't matter given Sunrise's own effect. Same with Infernal Rage's effect. The only monster that you could really go into with double fusion is Shining Neos Wingman, because you could fusion summon Infernal Rage followed by Shining Neos Wingman immediately, but then you'd be missing the on-summon trigger for Flame Wingman Infernal Rage, since it wouldn't have a chance to trigger, because both fusion summons would resolve before it had a chance to trigger upon being special summoned. So it's better to just make Infernal Rage, then on a subsequent turn, make Shining Neos Wingman. And then lastly, there's Wake Up Your Elemental Hero, which, again, also not much utility with double fusion, as this is just another card that would be far, far better used if summoned off of a card like Miracle Fusion by banishing any hero fusion from the grave and like all the warriors in Jaden's grave to give it a huge stat boost for its summon. So, as neat of a card as double fusion is, I don't want to discount that. It just doesn't have a whole lot of utility in this deck. Also, it like just came out, but even then, still not a whole lot of utility here. So with all that being said, and I think that's pretty much everything people wanted to address, I think that's pretty much it for the Jaden deck. I've been Wham Bam Duel, and I'm always happy to see you.